Hello, hello, can everyone hear me? I hope it's working. Thank you for joining us for this Ranked Choice Voting 101 webinar. I'm Joel Paul with Voter Choice Massachusetts. If you can't hear me, if you're having any issues, let me know in the comments. But I'm here to talk to you about ranked choice voting. So ranked choice voting is a simple change to the way we vote, but it can have a lot of profound impacts. So Voter Choice Massachusetts, we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to increasing the range of choice on the ballot and producing fairer outcomes for all. So in the presentation today, I'm going to talk about who we are as an organization, the problem with our current system of plurality voting, the solution, which is ranked choice voting, and then our strategy for making it happen. And that's the most key, because thinking about an election reform or discussing it is one thing, but actually making it a reality, that takes very specific actions. So the problem, some of you may remember this. These are the results from the election in Florida in the year 2000. And as you see, we had George Bush, Al Gore, and Ralph Nader all running for president. Bush and Gore were neck and neck. Now, they had both about 49% of the vote. Nader distant third with less than 2%. Now, that seems insignificant, but that's almost 100,000 votes compared to the 537 votes that separated Bush and Gore. From exit polling, we see what Nader voters would have done if he were not in the race. And about a quarter of them said they would have stayed home and not voted. About a quarter of them said they would have voted for George Bush, but almost half of them said they would have voted for Al Gore. And the pejorative term that people use to describe Nader in the situation is that he's a spoiler, that he's pulling votes away from a more popular candidate, allowing the least aligned candidate to actually win. Another way to think about this is by voting for their favorite candidate, Nader voters actually helped elect the candidate that they liked the least. And that's a problem. We should be able to vote honestly for who we want without adversely affecting the outcome. Closer to home, we've got this example in the Boston mayoral preliminary. In 2013, Boston for the first time became a majority person of color city. And we see that in the diverse field of candidates here. We had a lot of qualified candidates of color running for this seat. And Boston, like a lot of cities, has a top two preliminary system. So all the candidates are running in the field, and the top two vote getters go on to the final election. But what happens when we get to that final election? Well, it's a choice between two white Irish guys. Why is that? Well, even though we had a lot of qualified candidates of color, and probably because we had a lot of qualified candidates of color, they may have split up the vote, not allowing any of them to make it to the top two. And as you see, Charlotte Golorici actually was only 3 points away from making it to that final round. The Boston Globe found that some of her supporters were, in fact, trying to get other candidates of color to drop out of the race to give her a better chance of winning. Now, that's a big problem. We don't want to decrease the amount of choice. More candidates in a democracy should mean better process, more choices, more expanded opportunity for people to participate. But our current system is actually undermined by it. More recently, this is the 3rd Congressional District in the Lowell area. Congresswoman Nikki Tsongas announced that she was not running for re-election, and these 10 candidates ran to replace her. And the winner, Lori Trahan, won with less than 22% of the votes. Now, does she have a mandate from the district to actually be the representative? We don't know, and we may never know. Because all 10 of these candidates were in the race, a chance that somebody would get over half of the support is very slim. And you see that she won with less than a quarter of the support. Well, over 40,000 voters in the district voted for somebody other than Mr. Hahn. Now, this is one of the biggest news stories over the last few weeks. In the Fall River mayoral election, now, some of you probably have heard about this, but Fall River and its mayor, Jazel Correa, had a bit of a scandal, and he's being in a bit of trouble for fraud charges. And so the people of Fall River initiated a recall for the mayor's office, and they had a recall election, and 61% of the people who turned out for that recall election voted to recall the mayor. However, on that same ballot, that same exact ballot where 61% of the people said, yes, we'd like to recall the mayor, they asked, who would you like your next mayor to be? And Mr. Correa was on the ballot along with these 4 other candidates. And possibly because of the 4 other candidates on the ballot splitting the vote, he was actually able to win with just over 35% of those votes. That's a big problem. You had a vast majority, over 60% of the population say, hey, yes, we'd like to recall this mayor, we want somebody else. And because they had options, because they had more options to choose from, we actually got the same guy being reelected to the office. This is one of the craziest stories, and it shows exactly how ranked choice voting, if those 61% of people who had voted to recall him had actually listed other candidates in second, third, fourth choices, we could have had a very different election. Because I don't think there's a lot of overlap between that 61% who voted to recall him and the 35 who voted to reelect him. What I've described so far, this is not the exception, but often the rule in Massachusetts politics. So this is data from over the last 20 years, and we see that in 60% of our governor's races, 67% of our lieutenant governor's races, 86% of our district attorney's races, when you have 3 or more candidates in a race, the winner has less than half of the votes. This is a major problem. 44% of state reps races, a third of the state senate. This is happening over and over again. And I hope I've thoroughly bummed you out, because the plurality system is a true spoiler. It fails to guarantee majority winners. It fails to eliminate the spoiler effect. It discourages candidates from running because they'll be branded with the stigma of being a spoiler. And that limits our choice in the voting booth. Well, what can we do about it? The solution is pretty simple, and it's called ranked choice voting. It's a simple change to the way we vote. Very simple, easy as 1, 2, 3. It lets you rank your candidates rather than simply choosing one. So first choice, second choice, third choice, in the order you prefer, as many or as few candidates as you like. Well, what's that actually look like? Well, this is the ballot that Maine used in their gubernatorial primary last year. Maine's the first state to enact ranked choice voting for state and federal offices, and they used it in their elections in 2018, both primary in June and the general election in November. To win with ranked choice voting, you have to get over 50% of the votes, over half of the votes. You need a majority of the votes, either in the first round or in the instant runoff. Well, what's that look like? Well, let's take a look at this hypothetical example. We've got Connor, Gina, Ted, and Valerie all running for the same seat. In this example, Ted has 53%. That's over half, so he's the winner. But what happens more often is that the vote is more split up, and we've got, in this instance, nobody getting to 50%. So how does this work? Well, the candidate in last place is eliminated. In this instance, it would be Valerie. But the important thing is the voters who voted for Valerie, they are not discarded. That is a key difference with our current system and with ranked choice voting, because if you vote for an unpopular candidate right now, you're told you're throwing your vote away. You might as well just stay home. Well, with ranked choice voting, you can honestly vote for your favorite candidate because you have backup choices. If your first choice candidate, in this case, these voters' first choice candidate, Valerie, was eliminated, their second choice votes count instead. And we see the votes transfer. So that's important. Because on the ballot, the voters are ranking the candidates, we can see what would have happened if any one candidate were not in the race. So now we're up to 38% for Ted, 29% for Connor, 33% for Gina. Still nobody has 50%, right? So the next lowest candidate is Connor, 29%. He's eliminated. Whoa. We see that most of his voters, their next choice was Gina. Now, this is not a hypothetical example. These are the actual results from a race in Minneapolis where you had 2 Democratic candidates. These are not the right names, but we had 2 Democratic candidates, a socialist candidate and a Green Party candidate. And the two Democrats on the ballot, they were all running for city council. They split up a common core of support, not allowing either of them to win the election. But because of ranked choice voting, we can see where the true base of support, where the true majority lies. Winner. In Maine, when they used it for the first time, this is the first significant federal race where ranked choice voting actually came into play. And this is the second congressional district, a large district to the north of Maine. And we had Bruce Poliquin, Jared Golden, Tiffany Bond, Will Hoare, all running for the same seat. Bruce Poliquin was the incumbent, and as you see, we had nobody received a majority of the votes in the first round. Bruce Poliquin, Jared Golden, very close, 46% approximately for each of them. The independent candidates coming in distant third and fourth. But again, because they are able to rank their choices, we can see where their next choice lies. And when you eliminate these independents, we see that most of them actually prefer Jared Golden, almost by a 2-to-1 ratio, to Bruce Poliquin, which brings him over the 50% threshold, making him the next representative. In towns and municipalities where nonpartisan preliminaries are used, you can actually save a lot of money rather than having a preliminary election and a top two runoff. Because face it, not many people show up to those, right? You have two different elections, you got two different campaigns, you got twice the cost of operating the polls. With ranked choice voting, you can have one higher turnout ranked choice election to get the results in a much faster, much more democratic way. Gives you much more participation, much lower cost. Another thing, may not have noticed this in our politics, but there's been a bit of negative campaigning every now and then. It's very rare. But it's the incentive in our current system is to go negative. Because the best thing I can do, if I can't get you to vote for me, I can at least convince you that your candidate is terrible and you should just stay home, right? Well, it's different with ranked choice voting because I can still get your second choice vote. So I still want you to come out. And in some races, in San Francisco and in Maine, for example, the mayoral race in San Francisco, we had Jane Kim and Mark Leno. They were two of the candidates in the mayoral race, and they actually released joint ads together saying, hey, we are more similar than the other options in this race. Out of the people running for mayor, we are the most aligned. If you're voting for me first, vote for him second. If you're voting for me first, vote for her second. This is rather than splitting up a common core of support and fighting over the same constituents, ranking allows much more civil campaigns. Same thing we had happen in Maine. Mark Eves, Elizabeth Sweet, running for governor, did the same kind of thing. This is a remarkable situation where you never see politicians saying, hey, I may not be your first choice, but I want you to come out and vote anyway. So if you've ever gone door knocking, if you've ever gone canvassing for a candidate, this may sound familiar. Think about what you're told to do if you see an opponent's sign on the lawn. Well, skip that house, don't talk to them, don't waste your time because you want to talk to people that might actually vote for you, right? Well, with ranked choice voting, it's different. Rather than getting a frowny face and walking away, you can still go up to the door and have a conversation because you can still get their second choice vote. So you go up to the door and say, hey, I see you're voting for my opponent in this race. That's great. These are the ways in which our policies align. These are the ways in which we are similar. Can I count on you for your second choice vote? And you see how the incentives are completely reversed. Rather than trying to discourage people from voting for your opponent, you can still get part of their vote if their first choice doesn't have enough votes to make it. Now, ranked choice voting is a real practical solution. It eliminates spoilers and vote splitting. It encourages more people to run, curbs negative campaigning. It gives voters more voice and more choice in our elections, and it can transform politics in Massachusetts. Now, how are we making this happen? Because that's the key, right? We can sit around and talk about how this is such a good idea, but actually implementing this, actually making this reality is the key reason why Voter Choice Massachusetts exists, and I'm sure is the reason why a lot of you are here today. How can we make this a reality in Massachusetts? Well, let's look at how Maine did it. Maine became the first state to use ranked choice voting for statewide races, and they did it with a ballot initiative in 2016. So the voters voted for this ranked choice voting, and they used it for their first time in 2018 in the June primaries and the general election in November. Around the country, about a dozen cities already use ranked choice voting, from San Francisco, Minneapolis, Portland, Maine, Santa Fe, New Mexico, Berkeley. The city of Cambridge, Massachusetts has actually been using it since the 1940s, so this is not a new idea. And in the upcoming years, we have Memphis, Tennessee, Benton County, Oregon, Amherst, Massachusetts, and a few others all voted already to implement ranked choice voting, and they shall start using it in upcoming elections. Around the world, it's used in Scotland, Ireland, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. Australia has actually been using it for over 100 years. So again, this is not a new idea. This is an upgrade to the way we vote. It's already in use. This is a real practical solution. Over 50 colleges and universities around Massachusetts also use ranked choice voting. This is rather than creating a fractured, divided landscape to battle over, you can have a more cohesive, more inclusive way of choosing group leadership. National Organization for Women, the American Political Science Association also use it, and so do the Oscars for Best Picture. Very important, that one. Around the state, we have chapters set up from the Berkshires to the North Shore to the Cape and Islands. I myself am the Cape and Islands chapter lead, but all over the place to bring this message of ranked choice voting to people all around the state. Because we want as many people as possible to be excited to hear about this and get involved. We started with 54 people who met in a room here in Boston in 2016 after they passed ranked choice voting in Maine. There were 200 people on that mailing list. 54 of them showed up for this little meeting. And from that point, we've grown to over 25,000 members so far. It's truly astonishing because people see that this is a true practical solution and they want to get involved. We have almost 5,000 people signed up to be volunteers. Organizations around the state, from Common Cause Massachusetts, the Democratic Party, the Green Rainbow Party, Libertarian Party, Mass Vote, Our Revolution, Progressive Massachusetts, the Universalist Unitarian Action Network, they've all endorsed ranked choice voting as a real practical solution for improving our political system. All these former and current elected officials have endorsed, and this is one of the most astonishing things. When we introduced ranked choice voting legislation into the State House and Senate in January, we expected maybe 35, let's say a stretch goal of having 50 co-sponsors for it. That'll never happen, but let's aim for it. And over the course of 7 days, for anybody who's not familiar with how the co-sponsorship period works, the legislators are basically sworn in on at the beginning of January. They submitted their bills on January 18th, and they had until February 1st to co-sponsor. So during that less than 2-week period, we had over 50 volunteers from across the state who made altogether over almost 6,000 calls to our list, saying, hey, we need you to contact your legislator right now to ask them to support ranked choice voting. It was a really amazing 1-week period. And we ended up not with 35, not with 50. We got to 82 unique co-sponsors for our bills. This is really amazing work that was done by these dedicated volunteers. The Boston Globe has noticed our work, and they gave us a glowing editorial after sitting down and grilling our policy team for a few hours over the summer. Not just once, but a second time after the 3rd Congressional District, a third time, and now a fourth time after the Fall River fiasco, where they said this is exactly what ranked choice voting, what Massachusetts needs to improve our political system. Over the next 2 years and over the next few months, we are actively pursuing ranked choice voting legislation. The bills are in the State House and Senate. Got to update those bill numbers. I'll get that for you in a second. But If we are not able to pass it through the legislature, then we will gear up for a ballot question for 2020. We need to speak with all 200 members of the State House and Senate to make this happen. So one thing I want everybody who's watching right now to do is jot this down. The website is vcma.us, so Voter Choice Massachusetts, vcma.us/passRCV, okay? vcma.us/passRCV. And if you go to that website, you will be able to look up your state legislator, see whether they are a co-sponsor or a supporter, or we haven't talked to them at all. And it'll give you instructions for a sample email to send them, their contact information, and exactly how to get in touch and get them on board with ranked choice voting. We've added 5 more, at least, supporters since the co-sponsorship deadline, so we're up to a total of 87. But we want to get to a super majority over the course of the next few months, and we need your help to do it. So that is the key takeaway here is we need to make this happen by getting people all over the state to contact their legislators. And if you haven't already, on our website, voterchoicema.org, sign up to volunteer, because we need to mobilize our 25,000 constituents, our 25,000 supporters to all do the same. Really easy ways for you to get involved from home. You can host a call party, get volunteers from your local area to make some calls, put together the snacks. It's a fun way to meet your friend, to get some friends and neighbors together, all for a good cause. To succeed, we need people, money, endorsements. People, money, endorsements. That's been our 3 main focuses over the last few years. And because 54 people sitting in a room talking about policy is not going to get things changed. But 25,000 supporters around the state calling legislators, pushing for this, now that gets on people's radar. Raise funds. It takes a lot of resources to run this organization, to get to all these meetings, to have our trained speakers go and present to organizations all around the state. So if you would like to make a donation, you can go to voterchoicema.org, click on the donate button at the top right corner. Right now we actually have a matching challenge by the Hewlett Foundation, $200,000 matching challenge, and we are less than $20,000 away from reaching that goal. So any donations that you make today will be doubled. We have until April 8th to reach that goal. So definitely, if you want to make a donation, again, it's voterchoicema.org or vcma.us is the shortened form. But make a donation, and your money's doubled if you do it right now. And endorsements. If you're involved in any groups across the state, I see somebody from Indivisible Canton on the stream. If you have one of our speakers out to your groups, talk to everybody there. And we'd love your endorsement in this important fight. This is the graph of ranked choice voting spreading across the country like wildfire. But you'll see about 4 million people around the U.S. use ranked choice voting right now. If we are able to pass this in Massachusetts, that brings it up to almost 12 million people. And we are literally the forefront, the spear point of the national movement for ranked choice voting. Because when Maine passed it, we picked up the torch from them and said, yes, Maine's going to do it. We're going to do it here in Massachusetts as well. And we have organizations set up in Michigan, New York, Connecticut. There are ranked choice voting movements popping up in dozens of states around the country. And if we are able to pass it here, it really gives all of them a lot more momentum, because it gives them a lot more credibility. It's not just Maine over there sitting over in the corner. If Massachusetts can pass it, then anybody can pass it. Take action now. Again, go to voterchoicema.org, sign up to be a supporter, get in touch with us. If you want to talk to me personally, my email address is joel@voterchoicema.org. Again, that's Joel, Joel, at voterchoicema.org. Send us an email. We can get involved. There's a lot of ways. Help us recruit more supporters, host a house party, make some calls right from home. This is one of the easiest ways to do it. I have some cool videos that I made on how to do that right from home, little tutorials. Definitely recommend watching that. I'll pop the links in the description. But thank you again for joining us. This is a real practical solution to a lot of our problems, and your help is really going to make an impact. As I said before, the resources needed to make this a reality. Go to voterchoicema.org, hit the donate button. All the donations are doubled right now. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate you tuning in. Again, shoot me an email, joel@voterchoicema.org, or our general inbox, info@voterchoicema.org. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day.